Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. We hope everybody is doing awesome today.
As always, welcome back.
I'm always going to double check, make sure everything is taping fine, make sure nobody remotely shut us off.
Yeah, he's staged, but you never know.
You never know. And so we have with us a friend of the family, a friend that's been with us for quite a while. And Richard has quite a story to tell. And it's one about overcoming. And we love to do these type of things, and we want to share more of these type of stories of personal crises that lead to spiritual illumination and awakening, and then overcoming the difficulties and the challenges. So welcome, Richard.
Thank you, Mike and Cindy. It's great to talk to you. I'm looking forward to it, and really, I'm just excited to be able to share my story, my testimony with the family, and I hope it helps one or more of you out there.
I'm sure it will. As you know, there's always people that are going through different dark nights of the souls at different times. But in these times, with everybody going through ascension, there's kind of like almost a universal dark night of the soul that we are facing right now.
There's so many people going through so many different things. And the most important thing, I think, when you're going through this is that you're not alone, and that there's other people have done it, and there's so many inspiring stories out there. And Richard just had one that was super touching, and wow, gave me chills. Amazing.
So do share with us, because I think you've been following the channels since the original channel, Evolutionary, and since I was in Florida, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct. When I first started watching, you were in Florida. It was the Evolutionary Energyarts rather than the EEARTS. And really, I loved your calm demeanor. It was a great juxtaposition to my mind at the time, where I was trying to still kind of make sense, and I was in the midst of that dark night of the soul and trying to climb my way out of it, or kind of find my new center, so to speak. And I just found a lot of your content to kind of help not only put pieces together, but just it was going over things in such a calm way that it was a way for me to kind of take a cue from your energy and be like, okay, he's noticing everything I'm noticing, but he's very calm about it, and he can just kind of be aware, but yet not in fear. And so that's what was my big motivation, is to get out of fear, whether it was any realm of my life, whether that was fear of losing my life, fear of losing my job, fear of not following the right faith, whatever it was. It was just, I found a lot of solace in what you guys were sharing.
Well, we're glad it helped, and that's the bottom line, is trying to help others, because we have to shift the paradigm by shifting the individual paradigms one soul at a time, one person at a time. Awakening to the bigger picture, but then, even though we're facing all these challenges, and these challenges look to be the biggest ones we've maybe faced in 6,000 years or more, at the same time, there is this other side where things are really getting better, and you won't find that in any news. And that's really something that perhaps on purpose we're being distracted from seeing, the soul growth and evolution that's going on at this time period.
I think you might be hitting the nail on the head. I think there is, human distraction and instilling fear, or like where you're in that fight or flight mode, which, we'll get into this probably later, but with my story, I was pretty much perpetually putting myself into fight or flight every day for close to 12 years, and just like total survival mode. And when you're in that mode, it's very hard to be truly spiritual, because you're so caught up in literally just survival, trying to get yourself physically through the day to where you can go to bed that night. That it's very hard. It felt very hard, but it also helped me find my spirituality. But it's very hard when you're in the midst of it to have any type of real spirituality. And what I feel like society is going through is everybody's finally having to face, number one, the fear of the virus, right? Because it's everywhere, right? And then the fear of death is ultimately what the fear of the virus is. So people don't want to hear that any amount of death potentially to them or their family is okay or going to happen without having somebody give them a warm blanket to say it's going to be okay. And so it's just kind of this mass psychosis of we're all going to die, and that's a fact when you're born into this world. And I feel like society is just having a hard time accepting it because they've been forced to accept it at the same time.
Yeah, it's most definitely a wake up call and challenging. And then again, we also have the media going on, which is all about fear, constantly about fear. And this channel has also been accused, hey, you're nothing but just fear mongering, because there are those that want us just to focus on what's 5D going to look like. But at the same time, you have to realize the majority of people are not awake. More people are awake now than there was a year ago. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And that's part of the reason why we're seeing such a splitting between the people that are awake and the people that aren't awake. And then even amongst those that we would say are awake, still many still have, as I was equating it to Linus going around with his blanket, there's certain aspects that we just have a hard time letting go of because it brings comfort. And that could be most definitely something from our religious upbringing. But at the same time, if it's something that causes division, that's not a good thing, because we have to find the unity. We have to find the unity. But there are saints in every religious background. There are saints from a Christian background. There's saints from a Hindu, a Buddha. You'll find these individuals that won't get bogged up in the minutia, that will just rise above and see the common unity of all things from any tradition. And many times these are the people that there's so many legends about being able to do amazing miracles. It's because it's not the dogma, it's the unity underlying everything that they're tapping into, regardless of what tradition they come out of. And that's a beautiful thing. And so often when people go through overcoming obstacles, overcoming addictions as well. And obviously, addictions can be a huge obstacle. And, Cindy, though she's never been an alcoholic, she used to go to Alcoholics Anonymous because she loved the sharing and the open heartedness that would be going on there, where people would be bearing their souls to each other and learning and growing.
Well, it was so important for me because I knew that I wasn't alone in seeking escape from reality. And that's really what addiction or alcoholism is about. It's looking to escape. I can't do this, and I found that solace with other people, and they gave me such wonderful ideas, and I gave them really good ideas. And those were probably the best times in my life, was going and talking with people who had real life experience. And no matter how bad your situation was, somebody else had it worse, and they could tell you how they got through it. And if they did it, you can do it.
Couldn't agree with you more, Cindy, on that. That was kind of step one for me. I had my opinions of what AA or NA must have been. Unfortunately, I had experienced alcoholism and addiction first as a child, with witnessing my mother struggle for many, many years, and she was going to AA. So I kind of said, how much can it help? Because it didn't help Mom. But when I finally got my butt in there and started, just like you said, hearing the openness that people were speaking with, and then the truly wise and loving counsel they're receiving back, definitely was a huge boost. I mean, I don't know where I would have been without some of the people that I met in those rooms, and some of the testimonies that I heard to kind of pick me up off the floor and say, okay, I can try to do this one more time,
Well, that's a beautiful thing. So please do share your story in a little bit more detail with everybody so they can understand where you came from and what you went through.
Sure. So, again, my name is Richard. I'm 38 years old. Live in Brookfield, Wisconsin. I was pretty much born in this area, born and raised my whole life, in southeastern Wisconsin anyways. And when I was 21 and engaged to be married to my current wife, I got in a huge snowboarding accident. I pretty much was in a snowboard park on a jump, and to spare you guys a long-winded explanation, I pretty much got hung up upside down and landed on my head on the back of the jump, and herniated 3 discs, my C6, C7, C5, C6, and C4, C5. And did a lot of other damage. I had indentations in the inside of my lips for my teeth, so I was in a lot of pain. And so I was prescribed pain medicine. And I was prescribed it for about 4 or 5 months. I can't recall exactly how long it was, but eventually I was not prescribed it anymore. And I had grown, number one, accustomed to it taking away the pain so I could sleep at night, and it helped me sleep and unwind at work. So I wanted to keep taking it, so then I pursued it on the street, and eventually got addicted to Oxycontin, which I'm sure so many people have heard about or know somebody that may have fallen into that same trap. And I went through the whole rabbit hole you've heard about, and then some. So I was pretty much exclusively taking pain pills for probably 8 years of my 12 years of addiction, at which point it got so hard to financially afford to still continue to get Percocet and Oxycontin that I just switched to heroin. And for the last 4 years of my addiction, I was using heroin, and obviously that leads to just you making terrible decisions in life. My wife was at her wit's end. She had stood by my side for 8 years, and just watched me get, go further and further into it. And she didn't know what to do. She was trying to stand in faith and believe that I was going to eventually get to the other side. But everything I was showing her was making her think like I was on a one-way track to death. And, sorry, I get a little emotional talking about this, but, and so long story short, I proceeded to, go through everything you've heard about. I got kicked out. I was pawning my family's living room TV and the Xbox that I had just got for my daughters. I pawned a month later because I needed to get a fix, and my wife would keep all the money in an account that I didn't have the name on it because she was trying to do everything she could. I mean, that's the level of struggle and chaos that we were at. Eventually, I ended up getting pretty much kicked out of the house. I was living out of my car, begging for money in the middle of winter in Wisconsin to try to get enough gas to at least be able to start my car up a few times and warm up throughout the night. And that kind of led me to my wit's end, where I tried multiple times to get clean. And so I tried again, and they put me on Suboxone again. And I always felt like it was a never-ending story. I was never going to get off. And then eventually one day, me and my wife got in an argument. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go. I hadn't used in 6 months. I was clean. But I said, I'm going to go and just use intentionally. And I know that I haven't used in 6 months, and the amount I'm going to use, it's probably going to kill me. Well, I went and used, and it turned out to be 100% fentanyl, not heroin. So when I already was taking a dose that was capable of potentially killing me, fentanyl being 50 times stronger really killed myself. So I took it, and I was trying to drive 40 blocks up a street straight home. I died 30 blocks in and went through a pole. The car was totaled, landed on top of the pole. Luckily, a cop happened to be right there who broke the window out and hit me with Narcan. And they had to hit me 3 times with Narcan. I kept dying, and then they'd hit me with Narcan. I'd come back. So like I was dead in the car when he found me, and then he Narcaned me. I came back, and then then he moved me to the ambulance, and then and it's weird because I know all this happened because I was seeing it. It was very odd. I was never in fear throughout all that. I didn't even remember the accident because I died in the car before I hit anything. So the whole experience was really confusing mentally, but I didn't really realize what was going on at the time. But I was having an out-of-body experience, witnessing what was happening from a bird's eye perspective. So I'm seeing myself, getting the cop leaning in the car and trying to get me out of the car. I'm seeing myself, and my wife and kids actually showed up at the scene because it was right down the street from my house. And she was looking at Find My Phone, and my phone was showing that I was sitting in the middle of an intersection forever. And so she drove, like, thinking I had thrown my phone out the window because I was so angry. And then she saw that I was there. So my wife and kids were getting held back by the police while I'm getting loaded into the ambulance. It was a very dramatic scene and day. So pretty much I tried to commit suicide. I succeeded. And for whatever reason, God chose to give me another shot to make it right, like, rather than let it end as bad as it was about to end that day. Like, that would have been the last memory my kids had. That would have been the last memory my wife had. And it would have been in a moment of anger and rage, mainly at myself. But regardless, it was going to have this ripple effect, And it was like I saw that. I felt all that. Like, I realized, like, this is what you would have had to live with, like, in the afterlife, knowing this is how you chose to go out, like, as an addict, giving in to the addiction, tapping out, leaving your wife, leaving your kids, and then suddenly, poof, I'm Narcaned, and I'm back because they brought my physical body back, but with a medicine, right? So it's like, and that happened 3 times. So by the time I came back, I was so overly emotional from, like, probably DMT that had been roaring through my body, to be honest. And I'm having this crazy experience, and I'm just, like, overflowing with tears and sadness and, like, true sorrow for the decision that I had made. Like, true regret. Like, okay, I need to fix this. Like, this, I don't know why I'm here still. I don't deserve to be here. I've lost 3 friends, including my brother-in-law, to this addiction. So I felt incredibly guilty that I had lived and they had died. I mean, but I wanted to make it right. And I figured the only way I could make it right was to beat it. And so I left the hospital the next day and made a decision to, try to change my life, and, started getting into counseling again, ended up going to rehab called the Bluff Plantation in Georgia. And I didn't really know what I was getting into, but, it was 45 days of, like, no sugar in your diet, no nothing, no any mind altering, like, substance. It was just like, clean yourself out type of deal. And I made it through that. And then I went to, like, what would you call it, like a halfway house for 30 days with like me and 7 other guys. So I stayed in Georgia for over 2 months because I knew if I went back to Wisconsin, there was a higher likelihood that I would make a terrible decision and go out and use. So I was scared to come back. And so I finally came back. It was, after 30 days, it was like 75 days. It was 45 days in rehab and then 30 days in, like, the halfway house afterwards. And then I came back and continued therapy here in Milwaukee. And November 2nd will be my 3-year anniversary of no heroin, no opiates, no nothing. And I guess, that's that was my shortened version of my beauty from ashes story, I guess.
Well, that's definitely quite an experience you went through. And, I'm sure just the fact that you were outside of your body, that knowing, that alone changes the lens we view everything from, does it not?
Oh, yeah. The fact that I never felt any fear, the fact that I was like, I'm still here. And even when I came back, I came back and it was the strangest thing. It's like, you hear people talk about a knowing, and then you think you've experienced a knowing. But when you come back from a near-death experience, you really know something that, like life would have never given you an opportunity to know while still living. You've been shown a window that most people won't get to show. Like, everybody wants to know for sure what happens on the other side. Like, right, that's everybody's big, deep, dark secret. And when you have a near-death experience, as terrible as they are, for whatever reason you get to them, and I would not encourage anybody to go out and seek a near-death experience in any way, shape, or form. But when you unfortunately have one of those experiences, I feel like it can't not be life changing, because how do you explain the fact that you never didn't exist, but you know your body was physically dead? So if you're just an animal and just a pile of carbon that just happens to have these thoughts that aren't conscious or aren't tied to a spiritual body, then why was I never gone? Because I died 3 times that day. Why was I never alone? Why was I never scared? Why did I never experience darkness? I didn't get thrown into a fiery pit. I didn't have a conversation with God showing me every negative thing I had done. I felt regret because I realized, oh shit, I'm not going to be able. Excuse me. Oh crap, I'm not going to be able to see my kids and give them a hug again, and I'm like, my wife's going to be. It was regret for that, but it wasn't regret for me. It was a regret from the I was very aware of the separation that I had caused, but I was also very aware that I was still existed. I don't know how else to say it.
And in fact, you didn't really change. You were still you. It was just like a continuing circuit of typical thoughts, but a big realization at the same time.
Correct. Yeah, it was like a light bulb going, and I came back, and the main thing I remember, I mean, I'm sure I would have been emotional no matter what, but I was emotional because I knew, okay, maybe not everything in these religious textbooks is true, but we certainly live on. Yeah, maybe man's dogma has taken a right turn or a left turn here. What man hasn't made a wrong decision? So I can't even necessarily fault him for that. But what I can say is the essence of what's in all of those books, with the essence of what they're trying to teach all of their cultures, is what I experience, is that life goes on, that this is just a season, and I truly believe it's a school, because the lessons I learned, you wouldn't be able to learn if you were eternal from if you just got eternal life here on earth. What could you possibly learn? Because you could never have any consequences from your mistakes. Yeah. And if you don't have consequences, you don't have an opportunity to learn.
Well, think about this. Going in with our memories wiped, it's like we have real skin in the game, so to speak, and that we don't know for sure. Most people don't know for sure. And I've shared that when I was 5 and coming back from the funeral of my brother who had passed on, who was 11 years older than me. He was 16 when he died. And I remember just standing there staring at the kitchen wall and in shock, just thinking, I'm never going to see him again. I'm so used to him being by my side, reaching out my hand and having him put his hand in my hand. And then I was out of the body, and I was just kind of looking down at my body, looking at the wall. And I think it was my guides helping me to basically say, he's going on. He's still there. He's just in a different place. He's having a different experience now. You go on because you're eternal. And so I had that out of body because of my grief for him not being there anymore. That changed me. So I always knew from that point forward that we go on. I just knew that, it was it just like, it, even though, you obviously had an incredibly severe experience that was, so traumatizing. But there again, you never were not you. And there wasn't, as you said, no just blackness and nothing. You were watching your body. You were watching the scene. And I have 3 other friends besides you that were all clinically dead for prolonged periods of time, as long as 35 minutes. One was toe tagged and brought to the morgue, and then they came back.
Wow.
And they all shared the same thing. They were watching their families start to cry and to grieve, and they were watching everybody freak out. And meanwhile, they were kind of like, but I'm here. And then feeling bad also, wanting to be with them.
Right.
So
that's so interesting that you say that. It gives me chills just to hear that other people had that similar experience, or I guess my testimony is in line with theirs. It's I don't know. It's always cool to hear stuff like that, because it lets me know that wasn't just some figment of my imagination or my brain's way of coping with the trauma that was happening. Like I know what I know, and it's really encouraging to hear that it's in line with what others have said.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's kind of a universal experience. You know, there's been a few cases of people that have had negative near deaths, but I do tend to think again, it depends on where they are vibrating. So, you know, if they are somebody, you know, that their soul is vibrating perhaps at a much lower frequency, or their belief system is so impenetrated with that belief that, you know, I'm a guilty sinner, I'm going to go to hell, I'm going to go to hell, I'm going to go to hell. You could drive yourself into a lower experience. Now, you were obviously in a lower vibrational place, you know, at that time, but you're not a low vibrational person. I know your soul's not either. And, you know, obviously now you're totally changed and you have a much greater understanding of everything around you and how the universe works.
You know, it's interesting. That's really well said, number one. And number two, you know, if you would have ever told me, say, 4 years ago when I was still in the midst of trying to get clean and feeling like I'm never going to do it, no matter whether I tried to go to the doctor and get the medicine that they give you to quote unquote get off, or I try to do it myself, I'm just never going to be able to do it. And I had kind of lost all hope in myself. But what ultimately, somewhere along the line in that, you know, there's like a spark that got ignited, you know, and then when that spark was ignited, you know, it was suddenly went from I'm not going to be able to do it to I'm going to do it or I'm going to die trying. And that's when the change happened for me, you know, because I'd rather die and have to face my own mirror, so to speak, right? And say I died because I was trying to get sober and of the withdrawals or whatever, than continue to die in the addiction, because then I'm in the mess still. And so that's what the determination was for me, to get me off the center and get me moving forward. And then when you have that experience, I'm honestly thankful for it. Thankful for all the pain, you know. You know, I wish there were things I could do differently. I wish my kids didn't see me do some of the things that they saw me do. But they're so loving and forgiving, and we've had honest conversations about it at this point. You know, I'm very open with them about it, my testimony, so they know why they saw what they saw. And it's just, I'm thankful for it all. I wish, like I said, they didn't see some of it, but the lessons I've learned and the knowing that I have is worth almost more to me than any. I can't pick a tangible item outside of my family, who I know I'm going to always be with, whether it's here or off world. When that day comes for all of us, like, I know they're going to continue to exist too. But I think what I cherish the most is like the lesson. You know, I just hope that lesson could get shared with more people. You know, because they take all the magic out of life and they beat it out of life, and they make life just about, you know, ones and twos and true and false and red and blue and left and right. You know, all these things, and it just beats the magic out of the world. And I think when you have an experience like that, or you have an out of body experience, or you get deep in meditation, where we're sitting there and you're listening to the birds chirp and you're having the wind blow over your face and your arms, and you can have an experience where you're just grateful for sitting on the earth and feeling the wind blow against your arms when you've been panhandling for money to try to get by and keep yourself from freezing at night. You know, I'll always be able to find a reason to be grateful. And the average person that hasn't faced adversity, unfortunately, has to struggle with the fact that they haven't faced adversity. And so they sometimes can have a problem finding stuff to be grateful for, or they can find it easier to complain about all the things they don't have because they've never really experienced true lack. Once you've experienced true lack, you can always find something to be thankful for.
Most definitely.
You know, if you've got a roof over your head, you should be you should always be able to find something.
Well, making that gratitude list can be so important, even if you're not feeling it in the moment. You know, they have those sayings, fake it until you make it. There is definitely something to that, to get the brain synapsing. And for people who have hit that rock bottom, I understand, for one, because I have had my own struggles. Hitting that rock bottom can be such a huge, huge blessing, because there's really, truly nowhere to go but up. I mean, you're just down. You are leveled out. Nothing is going to change. So everything from that point forward becomes a huge blessing in your life. And then you start piecing things back together and you learn about the gratitude. And sure, we plateau out. We have times when things aren't so great, but then, you reach back, and all those tools that you've gained from climbing back up from rock bottom, now you have those. And I think we live in a society where we're not given these skills to cope with the way things are, so much like policy and procedure. Things have to be this way, when we are very intuitive beings. We are not human doings, we're human beings. And they've put us in these situations that don't even fit our soul. And then we're supposed to be normal. you know, I just think that having the ability to cope with the world that we have to live in is so important. And I wish that they would teach it from kindergarten, but that's not their agenda. So that's why I guess we need to really watch out for ourselves and our children and teach them these coping skills, these important skills like gardening and cooking and things that really get you through life, and how to meditate. And then that brings me to the point where, like, spiritually, how important is your spiritual practice now, as opposed to then. Now that becomes your lifeline.
Right. Yeah. I wouldn't be where I am without the spirituality that came along. I found my spirituality somehow, like you said, at that rock bottom. Whether the rock bottom forced me to kind of push through some of the paradigms and really just set down the dogma or the anger. I almost had anger towards religion towards the end, because I was so, there's a scripture in the Bible that says that God will kill the body to save the soul. And so I would say that to God every night before I went to sleep. And then when I woke up and I was still living the next morning, I would proceed to curse God out with every curse under the sun and call him, an SOB for not keeping his word, because I was still living. I mean, that's the depths of where I was at. But somewhere along that, I chose to pick my shield up, pick my sword up, and fight again, and give it one more chance, and just make sure it was one honest chance. And if I died on the battlefield, so be it. But I was gonna try one more times for myself, and that was who I was doing it for more than anything. But then for my wife and my kids, and just legacy. Not as an ego thing, but I wanted to leave a better legacy than, father of two that had a great loving wife who we never appreciated and used and used drugs and lost. I didn't want that to be my story. But if had I never found spirituality, I would not be able to have ever done it. If I wasn't watching messages of encouragement like you guys provide, or there's so many others too that just messages have helped me. I can tell that there's other light workers out there. So many of us have had traumas. And so I find so much peace in hearing others' testimony and others' perspective. When I listen to a video, I can almost pick up a vibe of whoever's making the video. I almost kind of it's almost like I'm sitting in a room talking to that person. It's very weird. I don't know if that's a spiritual kind of gift or whatever, but it's just weird. If I watch a video or even hear somebody's voice on a podcast, I just kind of pick up how they were feeling while they were saying it. And so many people just kind of help me understand, everybody's, going through this. Everybody has that dark night of the soul. Everybody has that rock bottom, and it's about what you do with it. You could hit a rock bottom because you lose a job, and I had to file bankruptcy too, because that accident, I didn't have car insurance. So not only was it medical and addiction and marriage, but it was going through bankruptcy. I mean, but bankruptcy alone can be enough to push people over the edge, right? And it's just, how are you going to handle that adversity? And I think you've got to dig down deep. You've got to rely on your spirituality, and you have to walk in faith. Like, that's your part of it. You have to get up every day and trust that, you know what, you're going to have what you need.
Yeah, and now it's not even just faith with you. You have a knowing, and the knowing is what changes everything.
Right. No, that's a good correction, actually.
See, and it's a beautiful thing because, the vibe that you put off that, we know, and it's the same vibe that I've gotten from others that have gone through this experience. They're just changed at the core. It's almost like you've kind of gained a cheat code in a game, and, you have an insight that others don't have, which allows you to perceive things from a certitude. So now hey, I screwed up in the past, but one of the biggest things is forgiving yourself. That is one of the absolute biggest things. Not dwelling on what I did, but now I'm going to be that best partner, the best father that I possibly can be, and I feel that in you. I can feel the energy come off of you. So yeah, I've felt like you're a brother the whole time, and there's people that we deal with too on a regular basis that have gone down similar paths and are on varying stages of that recovery path right now. And these people, they might have used some of these hardcore drugs. It doesn't change their souls from the fact that they're still starseeds and light workers. Can this happen to a starseed? Can this happen to a light worker? Absolutely. It could happen to the best of us.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I understand that a lot of beings that chose to come as volunteers on this planet didn't have the understanding of what they might come up against, and not having the ability to have coping skills for the planet that you're on. You could imagine you're going to turn to what works, whatever that might look like at the moment.
Yeah, that's what it was for me. That's unfortunately what, if I were to say what was the driver of my addiction, it was coping. I wanted my brain to shut off. I didn't want to, have those constant spinning thoughts of, different fears, right? And it was all of a sudden like that off switch for me that I never knew existed. And I was like, oh, well, this is convenient. I can just turn my can of care, or shut my care window whenever I want to, and then I can just make the world go away. And, but the unfortunate part about it is you lose yourself. It'll work for you for the first couple of times, and then you work for the substance the remainder of the time.
Yeah, and there's so many different things you can use, like if you do have depression, PTSD, things that cause trauma. So you grew up with trauma, and a lot of our traumas do come from childhood, and they still exist in growing up. There's different plant medicines that can really help the brain regrow. It's like super minimal doses to help you regain those coping skills too.
And just other
it's
healthy
interesting
habits.
That you say that. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
No, go ahead, Richard. Your line of thought.
I was just going to say, Cindy, that's interesting you say that, because that's actually something I did incorporate as well, was I believe, psilocybin, like you're talking about. I assume you're talking about that.
Yes.
So I actually grew my own as a way to kind of like grow my own medicine rather than take somebody else's solution from an orange bottle. So yes. That was a big part of what
Good
helped
for
me.
you. That gives me huge chills. I'm so proud of you for looking out for yourself and understanding that, all of these things in the orange bottle, they're not for expansion like Mike was talking about earlier. That's to help shut the brain down so we don't discover who we are.
And we don't even really need the substances, I think, at the highest level, although that could be a step, and it can help. It definitely can help. There's been so many studies that show that some of those things can help. We can also do it through meditation, through yoga, Qigong, Tai Chi. Any sort of mind-body exercises is wonderful. And, for me too, like for so much of my adult life, got used to having a glass of wine before bed to help fall asleep. Although there's been long periods of time where I won't have that glass of wine and I'm just as good. The trick is to make myself physically tired by working out really hard every day. Work myself out to where my body is going to be wanting to just go to sleep. And then learning some meditative techniques, like I will just basically pour breathe or breathe through the crown chakra or the third eye chakra in a meditative state while I'm lying down. That's what I do is when I go to lie down in bed at night when it's time to go to sleep, I focus on drawing in energy through the crown chakra, which also ties me to the higher self, so that the downloads and where I will experience myself traveling to in sleep is not going to be of a lower vibrational quality. It's, I really don't get nightmares, although I will get visions at times, visions of some things that are coming, quakes, natural disasters, or man-made things as well. But for the most part, this has enabled me to, fall asleep without anything. And, maybe a sleepy time tea or something like that. It's again, we can overcome addiction by replacing it with something that becomes a healthy habit as well. Like literally physically working out, which we should be doing 5 or 6 days of the week just to stay at optimal health overall. When you exercise, your body is giving off good endorphins, and it's helping you to achieve a natural high. And when you do things like yoga and Qigong, it changes the brain pattern, enables you to switch out of fight or flight, get into the rest and digest side of the nervous system. So all those things can help us to, be able to quiet that mind. Like what you said, quieting the mind, that's a big thing.
Oh, it is. It is. And it was incredibly hard for me at first. I mean, I'm kind of a hyper person. That's just the way I came out of the womb. And, I've got a lot of energy. Usually I'll like sit and walk around, even if I'm on the phone or something. That's just me. I probably put like, a ton of steps, 14,000 steps or something like that on the average day. But, and then I'm constantly working, but I just have been always go, go, go. And so for me to learn how to meditate, and I really learned, I had watched videos on YouTube, and I had tried to do it on my own. But when I went to Georgia in rehab, there was one of the therapists there was really big fan of Eckhart Tolle. And he would run an hour-long session where he would either put on an Eckhart Tolle video in the beginning, and then we'd do a meditation at the end or something along those lines. And so I started to really kind of like seriously try to do it. And that was revolutionary for me to find. But I mean, it was a struggle. When I first tried to do it, I was like, yeah, right. My mind's still thinking about everything else. You know what I mean? You don't get it your first time. But once I truly started to learn that I'm not my thoughts, and just how much peace there is in the present when you can get yourself into that state where you're just sitting in your backyard on the grass. There isn't anything else going on in the world. You're not worried about tomorrow. You're not thinking about yesterday. You're just there. And when you finally get to that moment, that alone is so peaceful and so beautiful. Not to mention like the out of body experiences and stuff like that you can get into with really deep meditation. So.
And that's a beautiful thing. And now you're in the same position as we are in that you've just moved to a new house, and you're getting yourself situated and getting yourself prepared for everything else that's going to be heading our way.
Yeah, super, super thankful. I guess that's the last chapter of my testimony. I guess it's that, keep the faith, and that we had lived in the city in Milwaukee, which is a big city. I know it's in Wisconsin, so people don't think there's big cities up here, but Milwaukee, I assure you, is like, it's Chicago Junior is how I would describe Milwaukee. And, a lot of drugs and everything, and we finally got out. We're able to sell the house, and we moved into an apartment so we'd be able to be a more attractive buyer. You guys know the drill, right? It's a crazy market out there, and we were able to, luckily, and with Source's help, get the house. Now we're just settling in and loving life.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. Hopefully it will inspire many.
Yep.
And, you know, it's a testimony, again, to what can be overcome.
Yeah.
Absolutely don't lose faith. And, you know, to anybody out there that's in the situation, you know, just put one foot in front of the other. Give yourself a break. That's the first thing. Give yourself a break. Stop beating yourself up. And, you know, that no matter how dark it seems today, there's still a light at the end of the tunnel if you start walking towards it.
And one thing I always like to say, if you're listening to this and if you're having trouble and you just don't know what to do, stop and look around and just do the next right thing.
Amen. Great advice.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Richard, and thanks to everybody that's listening to this. We hope you find it inspiring. Thank you for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. We couldn't do it without you guys. God bless and namaste.
Namaste.